Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg, Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia, and essayist and commentator Eric Lavine on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us is our co-host, good friend, Eric Lavine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, and I am Judge Richard Weinberg. Well, gentlemen, I've been waiting a long time for this. I've been waiting for this since 1979, and I'm talking about taking out the mullahs, the Islamist theocracy that oppresses its own people, kills its own people, tortures its own people, imprisons its own people, and has declared a war against Western civilization. They are the head operator, as well as with the Muslim Brotherhood, of the fight against Western civilization. And Trump and Netanyahu did the right thing. And what was that? Going after them before they could go after us. Now, with respect to those people and my so-called fellow Democrats, as well as the Western European leaders who say, why do we do this? Diplomacy was working, or give diplomacy a chance. Let me say, you're either fools, knaves, fellow travelers, useful idiots, but you have it all wrong. They were using this time, that is the Iranians, to build up their capacity to go forward with their nuclear ambitions, to build more drones, more anti-ballistic missiles, to build up their naval capacity, to suppress their people, to use their every effort to continue their worldwide jihad against those people who, though they think, have no right to live unless you submit to their political and religious views, and it's a total suppression of individual freedom. Now, how is that war going? The war, so far, as we tape the show, is going very, very well. We've knocked out most of their Navy, good portion of their Air Force. We've taken out a good percentage of their ballistic missiles and drones. We've eliminated key leaders, starting with the Ayatollah and down. The replacement entity that was supposed to, this council of advisors, supposed to appoint a successor. They themselves were wiped out. You know, if you're a future candidate for Ayatollah or leadership in that regime,
there's an open position.
There's an open position. You better have a very good health care and hospital
I think
policy.
a life insurance policy is
life insurance is probably better. So, but this is my problem, and then I'm going to turn this over to Jesse and Eric. You have internal opposition in the United States of America, led by apologist Democrats and isolationist Republicans. We are at war. It's time to back our men and women, our president, who are doing the right thing. There's a legal war. There's a constitutional war. It is a necessary war. You do not wait till the other side has a knife at your throat before you take action. That's the foolishness of Obama and Biden, who allow these people to arm, to build up, to wage war through proxies all over the Middle East, to wage threats against all over Europe and in the United States itself, to have open contracts on governmental leaders and political opponents. It's about time something was done, and you don't wait. You do not wait until the other side is geared to go. You go when you're strong and they're weaker. And thanks to the Israelis and the Americans back in the attack in June against the nuclear facilities, they were in a weakened position. They are still a threat. God protect the men and women of our military forces. This is a regime that's supposed to be the leader of the Islamic community, and yet they've declared war, unofficially, of course, against their Arab neighbors, fellow Muslims, and they've been killing them, attacking civilian places, airports, homes, lobbing in to at least 9 other countries. And they keep doing this and doing this and doing this. They're even taking shots at Cyprus and other places. Even some of the Europeans are starting to wake up. Now's the time to get on board and support this war. If we do not win this war, we're going to have to fight it again when they're stronger and they rebuild. And it leads me to my final point before I turn over to Eric and to Jesse. The final point is nothing less than regime change will work. If we allow these people to stay in place and just substitute one group of this Islamist fanatics, this death cult, to stay in place, thinking we can cut a deal with them, we're making a grievous mistake. Now is the time to eliminate this threat forever and put the government of Iran in the hands of sane, decent people who want to live in peace and want to work to protect and make their people healthy, secure, and prosper. Eric.
Yeah, well, I think we'd be remiss if we don't first remember of the fallen who have given everything in Operation Epic Fury. And they were all members of the 103rd Sustainment Command. Those killed include Sergeant First Class Nicole Moore, 39 of White Bear Lake, Minnesota, Captain Cody Cork, 35 of Winter Haven, Florida, Sergeant First Class Noah Tegens, 42 of Belleville, Nebraska, Sergeant Declan Cody, 20 of West Des Moines, Iowa, and Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, 45 of Indianola, Iowa. May their memories be a blessing. These are true patriots, and what have they died for? They have died to help save Western civilization, protect the homeland, and protect America's national security interest. These people did not die in vain. They fought and gave their lives for a just and righteous war. But you wouldn't know that listening to, as Richard pointed out, to many of the Democrats and some of the alt-right Republicans, isolationist Republicans. We've discussed this at great length on the show, that how Iran has been at war with the United States and Western civilization and trying to upend the American-led world order for the past 47 years. We've talked about how they've killed and maimed thousands of Americans. So it really makes my hair stand on end and shake my head when I hear idiots and morons from both sides of the aisle talk about how the threat maybe wasn't imminent. Well, how many Americans have to die? How many Americans have to be maimed? How many times does America have to be under attack before we decide that the threat is imminent? This is a regime, even though their nuclear program had been set back by the June attack, their goal was to, as Secretary of State Rubio has pointed out, their goal was to create and have as many ballistic missiles as possible with launchers in order to make them, to defend their nuclear program, to make it impossible to attack them. Now is the time to take them out. Richard, as you pointed out, this is when they're at their weakest, both economically, politically, militarily. This is the time to do it. But some of the voices on the left and the right, and let's start with the Democrats. If anyone had ever had any doubts that the modern-day Democratic Party is a dead shell, a carcass of the traditional Democratic Party, which has been filled by the Democratic Socialists of America, which hate America, who hate Jews, and they're socialists, all you have to do is listen to the words of the supposed grown-ups and moderates in the Democratic Party. Hakeem Jeffries gave what has to be one of the most shameful speeches or answers in the history of the Republic when he talked about how this effort, while American men and women are in harm's way, how this effort is going to fail and how the war they are fighting is unjust. Talk about giving succor to the enemy and undermining our efforts and trying to beat down the American military to try to persuade them that what they're doing is wrong. How offensive is that? And this is a man who wants to be Speaker of the House. He's not even qualified, to be the mayor of some town in upstate New York. It's really grotesque. And just to tell you how critical it is, the litmus test in the Democratic Party, that you must be anti-Israel or anti-Semitic in order to get ahead as a candidate, particularly if you're running for president. Just look at the speech the interview that Gavin Newsom gave yesterday. When he was asked about whether or not Israel was an apartheid state, he said, yes, it is an apartheid state. He's obviously either an idiot, an historical ignoramus, a liar, or just craven, or all of the above. Of course, Israel is not an apartheid state. It's just a blood libel. The guy obviously doesn't know what apartheid means. Of course, apartheid is a system in which certain elements, and of course in South Africa it was blacks, they had no rights, they couldn't own property, they couldn't run businesses, they could not participate in the political process, they had to live in segregated neighborhoods. That's not what it's like in Israel. Arabs are in the Knesset. Arabs are in the government. Arabs sit on the judiciary. Arabs can own homes anywhere they like. So this notion he just throws out there that it's an apartheid state, it's obviously a concession to the radical left, the DSA, that has filled the Democratic Party, that in order, and an acknowledgement that if you want to get ahead in the Democratic Party, you have to hate Jews. Or at a minimum, you have to hate Israel. So when you hear Hakeem Jeffries and you hear Gavin Newsom, what we're being told is they don't really, whether or not they love the Iran or not Iran, they don't really care. It's that they hate Donald Trump and Jews the most. And if you want to get ahead in the Democratic Party, you have to have those bona fides. But it's not just limited to the left. See, the problem is the Democratic Party's lost. It is now the party of anti-Israeli sentiment that you can't get anywhere unless you have those bona fides. The Republican Party, that fight's going on. Tucker Carlson. Let's be clear. Tucker Carlson is a classic Hitler-like Jew hater. He is an anti-Semite, and Republicans cannot tolerate it. He has to be called out. He has to be called for what he is. He has made the statement when he was interviewing the American ambassador Huckabee that maybe Jews should have a blood test to prove that they're entitled that they can live in Israel. A blood test to prove that you're Jewish? Sounds like Hitler to me. That's exactly what Nuremberg provided. Now he's talking about this new Chabad sect. The reason we're at war, that we've been sucked into this war by the Jews, America has, is by this Chabad sect. There is no such thing as a Chabad sect. There are Chabads. What is a Chabad? A Chabad is a rabbi and his wife who go to various parts of the country or around the world to be available to Jews who are typically secular. I go to a Chabad. I'm an American. I go to a Chabad. And they just make themselves available for the holidays, for the Sabbath, to have a place to go so that people can reattach to their religion and their faith. That's all a Chabad is. But this notion, as Tucker Carlson puts it, that this Chabad sect is together to persuade America to launch a holy war, these are his words, of destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem to build a third temple, this guy's grotesque. And Republicans cannot sit by silently and hope he goes away. The Democrats lost the battle, but the Republicans are still fighting it. And Republicans have to win it. Anti-Semitism has no place in the Republican Party. There's no place anywhere. But Tucker Carlson has to be called out.
Jesse, we have a few minutes in this segment that we'll pick up again with you at the beginning, the second segment. What are your thoughts?
Sure. My thoughts are, it's exactly what we were saying. We started off, number one, it was right and just for us to open up the show about Iran and also mention the servicemen and women of the United States Armed Forces who lost their lives so that we can remain free and secure here on our homeland, and those Americans and protection of our Western society and our philosophies. So it's proper and just that we did that. Last week we were discussing this, and for like 2 weeks leading up to the Saturday, February 28th attacks on Iran, jointly by Israel and the United States, we were talking about Purim, and we were talking about on February 19th, the president said that he's going to give these guys he's going to give Iran 10 days to work diplomatically towards a solution. As we pointed out last week, that's 10 days ended on or about March 1st. And, I think diplomacy did work here. Number one, it exposed Iran for what it is to the Western world. But really, more importantly, it allowed the United States to put into place its pieces that it needed to have air superiority, to remove the leadership of Iran, the mullahs and the leadership of Iran, to decimate and almost eliminate completely the Iranian Navy, and also continue to attack and provide an atmosphere for the people of Iran to move forward now and take back their country. So in that case, the patience that we were talking about over the last several weeks is one that I think finally, as we say today, and we report today, has come to pass and has been successful to this point. Now, in terms about divisions in our own homeland, number one, on that point, the Democrats, right now, every party's got fringes. A part of it, it's inevitable, and it happens. The difference here is whether you're a commentator or not, the Democrats are being run by their fringes. The Republican Party has demonstrated, even with its fringe, a very isolated small number of elected officials like Massey and libertarians and such that are within our Republican column. But those on the outside of the party, as commentators and such, they don't run the party. They don't dictate this party. They wanted to indicate that they did, and they tried to do that by declaring their friendship with the president or their assistance to the president. But this president governs on his terms. He governs and leads this party on his terms, and those terms are very, very simple. What is good for America, it comes first. What's good for America's allies comes first, and the protection of our Western society, specifically that in the Western Hemisphere, comes first. So as we discussed here, you're always going to have idiots. You're always going to have fringe individuals on either side. However, on the Democratic side, the fringe is running their party. The fringe is in control of the levers of authority of their party, while we have 96% of the Republican Party speaking with one voice. It speaks with our ally in Israel. It speaks with our troops, and it speaks with America coming first and foremost.
Thank you. We have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentary, essayist Eric Lavine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in but a few moments with more important and interesting conversation.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our nation has to offer, especially healthcare. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg, Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia, and essayist and commentator Eric Lavine on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Lavine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Now, I just want to raise this issue. This fight is a very important fight. It's not only about taking out Islamist extremism, it's concerned about hegemony, but it also impacts our worldwide position, that is the United States' worldwide position as the leader of the free world, fighting against the axis of evil. So there are very strong benefits and concerns that flow out of the fact of the interrelationship between Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela. Eric.
Yeah, so I mean, in large part, this war, as important as it is to get rid of this nihilistic Nazi death cult, it's about China. Remember, both parties keep talking about how we have to pivot to China, we have to pivot to the Pacific, we have to pivot to China. But we haven't been able to, and part of China's strategy is to keep us bogged down fighting regional bad actors, Venezuela in South America and Iran in the Middle East. Now, Iran posed obviously a much greater threat to the United States than Venezuela did. Venezuela is run by traditional criminal narco-terrorists. They aren't ideological, they're just interested in the criminal enterprise. These guys are nihilistic death cults. I mean, they're ideological. You can't deal with them on any level other than to kill them. But remember, China was the number one purchaser of Iranian sanctioned oil. So China would buy very inexpensive oil from Iran. They would similarly buy inexpensive oil from Venezuela. If we cut off the oil supply from Venezuela and from Iran to China, China now is in for a big hurt. We can't control China's energy flow. That puts us in a much better position. So this is about dealing with China. Keep in mind, China has roughly control of over 70% of the world's rare earth minerals, which we need. And China, if they chose to, could cut it off. Now, obviously, we need to do a better job of getting access to rare earth minerals without putting China as part of the supply chain. But to the extent that China would have any leverage with us, it is critical that we have leverage over China. And there's no better way than for us to have leverage over their energy supply, their oil supply. And that's in large part what this is. And if we ever want to be able to pivot to China, we got to be able to get out of the Middle East. We got to be able to get out of South America. And by attacking Iran and neutering Iran and destroying this regime, we can then put in place. Remember, 3 days before this war started, the Prime Minister of India, Modi, was in Israel. Now, he didn't know the exact timing of when the war would start. Maybe he did, but I don't assume he doesn't. But he knew one was coming. So you have a very close geopolitical relationship between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel. Israel's not in the Horn of Africa because it's recognized as Somaliland. And you're going to have a very strong relationship, incredibly strong relationship between Israel and India, the two technical giants. India purchases a lot of Israeli military hardware. So we can pivot. We can leave the Middle East. Not completely, but we can primarily leave the Middle East and leave these countries, pro-Western, pro-American countries, in place. And they can oversee the Middle East. As long as Iran was there undermining all these countries, it was impossible to leave. Now we can truly pivot to China when this is over. We can truly deal with the greatest threat to the United States.
Jesse.
It's my estimation that every conflict right now involves and is a target of China. Either it's a message from the United States and its allies, or it's China becoming involved, as Eric said, and you said about bogging down the United States and its allies. Perfect example. I believe that the only victor in the Ukrainian-Russian war is China. They were watching the responses of NATO, the UE, the United States, up until January 20th of 2025. That's when President Trump took his oath of office, and things began to change. Well, so remember, I want to pick up on what Eric said about the control of oil, getting cheap oil from Iran. That was one of their sources. One of the other sources they had was Venezuela. That was where they were also making inroads in the Western Hemisphere, and I think, and also purchasing oil from Venezuela. Now the United States is in control of that, and I think recently sold or allowed the sale of certain amount of crude oil to China. But again, that's under our control, and that ultimately, that's what needs to happen in Iran. It needs to happen in that area, because we cannot allow another Iraq. Number one, we don't need another forever war. Number two, and I mean that a war with no end, with no plan. In Iran, we need to make sure that there is a Western Hemisphere, U.S. Israeli ally there, so that it will be a point of strategic importance, economically and militarily, to check China. So now and the other message I think that this president does is he does not do things in singularly. At the same time, and right before we took action in Iran, we took action in Venezuela. Simultaneously, as we were doing commencing our bombing with Israel against Iran, it was the United States forces that were joining Ecuador in their first land engagement against the cartels. Maybe you say, well, that's a little bit more drugs and more domestic. Everything with the cartels, we all know, deals with. There's a lot of cooperation about fentanyl with China. Again, that is another message that these United States armed forces under this Department of War leadership and the President of the United States is prepared and ready to do what needs to be done at multiple locations. But Eric and Judge Weinberg, you're right. We cannot get bogged down, because we cannot get bogged down in one area. We need some relief, first and foremost, so that we can now redistribute our forces for what will be the big entanglement. I hope it never comes. And I hope that China realizes and sees the ill of its ways of trying to expand, take Taiwan, or become, as President Xi wants it to be at its ceremony, the singular world power. I believe that this president is doing that. He's demonstrating it in multiple different platforms and manners. And as we just pointed out in this discussion, he's controlling the materials like oil. And let's not forget that now if Western alliances have the oil and China has 70% of the critical materials, then there's trade to be done there.
So with us is my good friend, another noted attorney, great leader of the bar, a great international lawyer, business lawyer, past president of the New York State Bar Association and president of Harvard Club, my good friend Steve Younger, who's now senior counsel at the international law firm Withers, based out of England. So, Steve, there was a case just recently in the Supreme Court of the United States. It was a tariff case, and President Trump lost that case by 6-3. And my questions to you, and you're an expert on this area, is Trump has lost this case. Well, what's next? What should he do? What are his moves? What's the impact on our economy? And I understand, talking to you earlier off the radio, that there is a case now in the Court of International Trade where the judge has ordered the government to come up with a formula to pay back these monies that were taken under tariffs. So it's all yours, Steve.
Thank you very much, Judge Weinberg, and I'll try not to let that introduction go to my head. But look, what's the background here? The president imposed tariffs on a wide range of goods, things like shoes, perfume, scarves. And why did he do it? Because there was an emergency due to the manufacturing jobs that had moved out of the states and offshore. So the Supreme Court disagreed with whether the president had his own power to impose those tariffs. They unanimously decided that the power rested in the hands of Congress. So that was the unanimous ruling. But the more important ruling is whether a decision like that was important enough that it had to be decided by Congress. So the key vote here was Justice Gorsuch, who was appointed by President Trump. He explained that Congress had not given up their right to set this kind of tariff. Do you want to get into what the president's response is, Judge?
Well, I mean, it seems to me he's just announced that he's going to increase tariffs another 15 or 20%, and this time he's relying on more specific statutes. He's staying away from the issue of emergency, as I understand, and he's relying on the individual statutes, which would include national security. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so first, he already announced that tariffs of up to 10% would be imposed under a different statute, not the emergency statute. And he's likely to take further action in the next few days because today, Treasury Secretary Bessent told the public, it's my strong belief that the tariff rates will be back to their old rate within 5 months. Now, you have to understand that these new tariffs that Secretary of Treasury Bessent is talking about can only last for 150 days. Now, 150 days is a long period of time, unless Congress approves an extension. So that's the tariff that has been imposed, but that Bessent has talked about imposing.
Well, so what happens now with the judge telling the U.S. government that on Friday they have to come up with a proposal to how to pay back these hundreds of billions of dollars? What happens? That's not realistic. How is a judge going to be able to mandate in a couple of days just having a formula to pay these things back? Seems to me this is very complicated stuff.
It is complicated stuff, and as you know, when complicated things happen in the United States, people go to the courts. And there's already been a case filed that was in one of our federal appeals courts, and they said that the issue of whether refunds are in order has to go ahead in a specialized federal court. Yesterday, that court ruled that all the tariffs imposed by the president must be rescinded. The case is before Judge Richard Eden, who is a very distinguished and long-serving judge. But nonetheless, it's highly likely that the president will appeal that ruling. So we need to keep watching the direction of this issue and how it will play out in the courts. And I don't think there will be any certain answer for some time because these appellate rulings take time to go on, and it's not so clear that the president can appeal right away because it has to be, as you know, a final action to take an appeal.
Well, the problem is this has become both a political and an economic football. One of the arguments that President Trump made and his Treasury Secretary made is that this is a revenue gainer for the United States and will help offset deficits. I've never been a big tariff fan. People who historically opposed tariffs, like Larry Kudlow and Steve Moore, went along with it. I think ultimately you're much better off in a system where the Congress sets the tariffs. Only in exceptional circumstances can a president do that. The national security ability constitutionally is something he can rely on, or specific statutes. But the fact of the matter is, I hate to see a situation where we have economic and political uncertainty in the months to come. Your final thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty, and the point you raise is very well taken because a lot of conservatives believe in free trade. So the difficulty is free trade was taken to such an extent that it led to a huge loss in jobs, and that had an impact on the working class. The fact that this involved tens and hundreds of billions of dollars was actually used against the president by the Supreme Court. If it involves tens of billions of dollars, well, shouldn't that be decided by Congress, not by a president? We all remember President Biden, who forgave student loans. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that. That's a decision because it's of such a scale, it has to be decided by Congress. The same thing was used against the president here, and that's where Justice Gorsuch is so important because his opinion says if it's something this important, it's Congress that has to act, not the president.
Well, I agree with that, and I think it is Congress's role under the Constitution to do that. I'm hopeful that President Trump will adhere to that. President Biden said, I'm going to do it anyway with his forgiveness of the student loans, which is a different discussion, Steve, for a different time. On behalf of Jesse Garcia, Eric Lavine, and myself, I want to thank you very much for coming on Let the Record Show today to talk about this important issue. This is an issue that's going to stay with us for a long time, and it is a historical decision. Thank you very much for being with us. Once again,
it's always a pleasure. Jesse and Eric, it's a pleasure to talk to you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please stay tuned to Let the Record Show. We'll be back in about a few moments. We're going to have Senator John Sununu of the great state of New Hampshire coming on, get his thoughts on some of the most important issues of our time. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Fox News is now streaming live on Fox One. When it matters most, turn to the voices you trust. We go beyond the headlines, bringing you the stories you won't hear anywhere else. Live coverage, sharp analysis, real perspective. At home or on the go. Stay connected when it counts. Stream Fox News on Fox One. Download today.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg, Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia, and essayist and commentator Eric Lavine on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Lavine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, and I'm honored, delighted, and privileged to have Senator John Sununu of the great state of New Hampshire. Senator Sununu serves in the United States House of Representatives, serves in the United States Senate, is running again this year for a seat in the United States Senate. Senator, what a delight to have you here. The senator,
great to be with you.
The senator is a graduate of MIT twice, and a bachelor's and master's in engineering.
We couldn't do
it right the first time. Okay. I know. Right. And has an MBA. Has an MBA from Harvard. Has a great experience in both engineering and the business community, and is a common sense, centrist Republican. Senator, it's just a delight to have you here. I'll turn you over to the good auspices of our friend Eric Lavine.
Senator, welcome. Senator, welcome. It's great to have you. So you have an upcoming election for Senate, and I'm just curious, why don't you tell the folks what the big issues are up in New Hampshire?
Sure. Well, look, it's an important race to New Hampshire, to be sure. New Hampshire is a Republican state. We have a Republican governor, state Senate, House. But we haven't had a Republican representing the state in Washington in a decade. And a variety of reasons. Haven't had the right candidate at the right time. Had some tough elections in 2018 and 22. But we need the right voice, the right person, and I believe I not only have the experience and the perspective to do the right thing for New Hampshire, but look, I've done it before. So there's a track record there. People know it, they see it, they feel it, and I'm excited about the race. Here in New Hampshire, look, it's what you hear about elsewhere in the country. There's certainly national security, public safety, security at the borders, but also the economy, right? Jobs in the economy, affordability on energy, keeping energy costs down in the Northeast, always a big topic. Healthcare, right? Congress has really screwed up our healthcare system. There's no doubt about it. We need more competition, more choices, health savings accounts for everyone. So, they're sort of kitchen table issues, to be sure. But if you open the paper or go online any day, you're going to see a lot of talk about national security, and voters want to talk about that as well.
So when you talk about national security, obviously the top issue on that right now is Iran. How do you think that war is going, and what do you think? And what do you think of the president's objectives?
Sure. Well, look, the men and women executing this operation have done an extraordinary job. The technology that's been used, the approach that's been taken, I think has been effective, very effective. And I do think the objectives are clear. One of the things that drives me crazy turning on the mainstream media is that they pretend they don't know what the objectives are. When for months we were negotiating or trying to negotiate three basic things: end to the nuclear program, end to the ballistic missile program, and an end to Iran's support for global terrorism. For 47 years, this is the biggest supporter of global terrorism around the world. So it was absolutely clear months ago what the objectives were if we needed to take military action, and the president was clear that the military action was on the table. So the strikes themselves, we know what they were about. We know what they're trying to accomplish. I think they've made great progress on the dismantling the nuclear infrastructure and operations. Obviously, they've made great progress on the ballistic missile complex, but there's more to be done there. And I think only when we've really taken out their command and control centers and the infrastructure of the terrorist organizations around the Middle East are we really going to be confident about accomplishing the third objective.
So I guess the other big news just before we came on the air is that Homeland Security Secretary Noem has been fired. And the president
reassigned.
Reassigned. She's been fired.
She's been given a new job.
As long as it doesn't involve shooting dogs, I think we'll be okay. And the president has nominated Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma. I think a wonderful choice. But I was just curious as to your thoughts on the Noem tenure, the reasons for her being terminated, and the nomination of the new senator.
Well, ultimately, with cabinet officials, it's about confidence. I think she had really lost the confidence of the president, certainly lost the confidence of a number of members of the Senate as she went through the hearings the last couple of days. But even before that, spending hundreds of millions on advertisements with no clear point or objective. Clearly, she got out ahead of herself on some of the statements she made in the wakes of the tragic incidents in Minneapolis. She couldn't get along with Tom Homan. I mean, I don't know anyone who can't get along with Tom Homan. Even some of the Democrats got along with Tom Homan. So I think those things really weakened her position. Markwayne would be a great leader at DHS. He obviously has the president's confidence. And look, it's an important role, maybe as important right now as it's ever been, given what's happening in Iran and given the importance of using all of our resources and intelligence to keep the homeland safe.
Jesse, questions for the senator?
Senator, thank you for joining us. Number one, your dad was one of my father's great heroes when he first introduced me to politics in 1979, 1980. So it's always good government when we have a Sununu serving. So I appreciate that you're putting yourself out there again and going to flip that seat up for Republicans in New Hampshire. You know, let's stick with the border for a moment. A lot of attention was always given to the southern border. However, it was President Trump who also identified the northern border, where there was a stream of illegal drugs that were flowing up there. Can you speak to a little bit about that and how that impacted the families of New Hampshire?
Sure. Look, there's definitely a flow across the northern border in terms of drugs and fentanyl. New Hampshire had one of the most significant, fentanyl issues on a per capita basis of any state in the country. It was during a time when my brother was governor, or at least began before he became governor. They made great progress while he was governor, and overdose deaths are really at a recent low at this point. So they've done a good job getting their arms around it. But you point out that border security is absolutely critical. Now, when I talk to people here in New Hampshire, I remind them, and it's a shame they have to be reminded, anyone in the country, but 2 years ago, we had thousands of people coming across the border, thousands a day. We all saw it on video and television, and it was a human tragedy, an absolute human tragedy, a tremendous amount of suffering. And what were we told? What did Joe Biden and the Democrats tell us? They couldn't do anything about it. They were powerless. And it turns out that was just a complete lie. So, I talk to people, I talk to you about this importance of this race in New Hampshire. It's important to the country, though, that we keep the Republican majority in the Senate. This is the best chance to pick up a Republican seat this year. And in doing so, protecting that majority means we protect the gains we made on keeping taxes low in the beautiful bill, and starting to get our arms around spending, on securing the borders and on beginning to roll back some of the crazy regulations that we felt from the left. All of these things have been achieved. Many, in fact, most of the ones I just mentioned in legislation, and we need to protect them. And that's the importance of that Republican majority in the Senate.
Well,
I'll give our anchor a little bit of time, as you requested.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
He always wants to weigh us down, but there you go.
So, Senator, I think you've hit on something that's so very important, and it has to be stressed. The accomplishments of President Trump in this first part of his second term, not even a year and a half into his second term, is absolutely extraordinary. He's rearticulated the importance of the Monroe Doctrine, has acted upon it. Venezuela, which was a threat to the United States interests, is being dealt with. Cuba soon will be dealt with. This has helped marginalize the axis of evil because of the waterways and impacts on the ability of China to get oil. And we're going to see, as a result of President Trump's actions here in the Middle East, that the waterways will be controlled by our influence and not by the Houthis and the Iranians. That's very, very important because of the dependency of China on oil, which gives us a kind of balance, a leverage against our dependence on them for the natural resources, the minerals. But what people don't understand is if you don't have a United States Senate that's held by the Republicans, everything will stop. The federal judges will not be appointed in a timely way, if at all. Cabinet appointments, sub-cabinet appointments, administration and governmental officials will be slowed down. So what are your thoughts? What do you say to people and say, well, it's just an election in New Hampshire. What's the big deal whether we have a Democrat or Republican? I say if we don't win the Senate again, then the United States' future is at risk because when the Democrats come back, they'll reopen the border. Look what this kid who just got the Democratic nomination in Texas has. He's already said he's for open borders.
Yeah, and that's really the fundamental question. Do you want to go back, right? Do you want to go back to those open borders that we all witnessed and were shocked by? Do you want to go back to 9% per year inflation, 20% over 4 years, the worst inflation since the 70s? Do you want to go back to out-of-control spending that drove that incredible spending? Go back to weakness, go back to paying off. I mean, we paid the Ayatollah off $50 billion under President Obama. That's horrifying.
I believe it was 100. I believe it was 115 billion. 115 billion.
I wouldn't argue with you about the money. I know 1.7 billion of it was shrink-wrapped cash. That I do know,
and not in dollars. And not in dollars, because he was evading the federal law.
It really is a tragedy. So we can't go back. That's the importance of holding the Republican majority in the Senate. Economically, we also have set a great foundation for long-term growth, made the tax code permanent at low rates, got rid of taxes on overtime and tips as well, paring back all of the crazy regulations, gives confidence to businesses to invest capital, to grow, to hire employees. And we've seen productivity growing like never before over the past 2 or 3 quarters. So great economic foundation, but maybe most important, a great national security foundation.
And also, frankly, and people shouldn't forget this, the left wing of the Democratic Party, whether it's Islamists or the socialists or just a crazy cultural leftists, they've been trying to impose their values on American society, which is really a moderate, centrist, common sense group of people. The idea, for example, like this kid who's now the nominee for the U.S. Senate in Texas, he says there's 6 different sexes. I mean, I don't know where he gets this from. And it's a good idea to have boys in women's locker rooms or have boys or men, in sports where they can hurt our daughters and our granddaughters. What are your thoughts about that?
Really a total contradiction of just common sense. I mean, tolerance is, I think, essential. And in New Hampshire, we have the phrase we're proud of: live free or die. Be thoughtful and tolerant of other people. But allowing boys into girls' sports defies common sense. It's unfair. It upsets families. It doesn't create the right opportunities for other girls. It's just common sense. And so you're right. The left just wildly overreached with their doctrines, with their theology, and took it a step further and decided they had to impose it on other people. It wasn't enough for others to be tolerant. They had to impose their views on other people, and I think it's hurt them tremendously. It certainly has here in New Hampshire. I mean, in New York, you've got your own challenges with your socialist leadership, but I mean, it hasn't taken him long to fail and to reverse every promise he made, because they were all based on the craziest kind of economics you could possibly imagine, and they can't be done. You can't make everything free. As Margaret Thatcher said, socialism is great until you start running out of other people's money.
Well, that's exactly right. I think your point is very well taken, Senator. Look, you have to, everybody's talking, the buzzword these days, the Democrats use all the time, is affordability, affordability, affordability. The problem is nobody is intelligently addressing the fact that when you overtax and you overregulate and you put all these impositions on the private sector, costs are going to go up. And this is going to be problematic for economic growth and opportunity. And they also insist upon destroying fossil fuels. And they say that, wind and solar is going to take care of everything. That's the most ridiculous proposition in the world. We need energy independence to take care of our economy and our people, so they're warm in the winter and they're cooler in the summer. And we need energy independence so that we don't hand us over to geopolitical enemies. Your thoughts?
I mean, I would absolutely agree. And look, affordability is an issue only because we had 20% inflation under the Democrats, and we certainly didn't have 20% wage growth. That puts pressure on everyone. On top of that, they've messed up the healthcare system. Premiums have gone through the roof under Obamacare. They haven't gone down. They've gone up dramatically. You mentioned energy. They're mandating that we buy the most expensive energy you can find, right? Solar and wind power. They're mandating that providers buy this stuff at above market rates and stick customers with the price. So this issue is one of the Democrats making. I mean, I think you talk about production and energy, building new pipelines, new transmission. That's how you deal with energy costs, right? Competition in healthcare, price transparency, health savings accounts. That's how you deal with healthcare costs. So, conservatives have great approaches and solutions for these problems that were created by the left having their way under President Biden.
Eric.
Yeah, so I wish, Senator, I could agree with you when you say that the mayor of New York, Mamdani, has gone back on his word. No, he's pressing forward ahead. He's pressing ahead.
Didn't get rid of the free buses.
Well,
it's not the grocery stores. I don't know.
The grocery stores. He's pushing forward. He's looking for funding from the grocery stores. On the free buses, he's blaming it on the governor that she hasn't funded it yet. But he has pushed forward with raising taxes. He made a speech in which he went up to Albany and told the governor and told the state legislators that if they don't raise taxes on the top 1% or whatever it is, that he's going to raise taxes in New York City on property owners by 9.5%, 10%. And which, of course, is extraordinarily regressive because he doesn't believe in private property. This is all about destroying private property. He thinks ownership is a crime.
Yep.
So
that is dangerous. That is such dangerous and wrong-headed thinking.
So, I mean, he has a housing czar who does not believe in private ownership, thinks that all housing should be owned by this and run by the government. I mean, this is a guy that wants to bring Havana, Cuba, and they want the Soviet Union and Caracas to the shores of the Hudson River. So I wish you were right.
My thoughts are with you.
What about your prayers? Your thoughts aren't enough. We need your prayers also.
All right. No, I'll do my best, Eric. You know I will.
Well, Senator, what we do need is we need to say to our listeners that Senator John Sununu has to be returned to the United States Senate because it's in the national interest that we have you back in the Senate, Senator. So if people want to support your candidacy, how can they do that?
Thank you, gentlemen. It's sununusenator.com, SUNUNU senator.com. All the information they need about the campaign, the organization, the message is there. I'm excited about the campaign. Look, there are only 3 chances to pick up a Republican seat this year: New Hampshire, Michigan, and maybe Georgia. This one is right at the top of the list. And when we win in New Hampshire, we close the door on Democrats getting any control in the Senate. We solidify that majority for Republicans. And I'm excited about the race and great to be with you today.
Well, thanks again, Senator. We're delighted to have you, and Godspeed, and we look forward to having you back on the show as the campaign unfolds. Thank you very much for being with us.
I also just want to...
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, John. You're terrific. Thank you. Just talking about the Senate, I just learned a few minutes before we came on the show today that Senator Steve Daines from Montana has decided not to run for re-election.
I know. What a terrible loss that is.
It's a great loss for the country. Steve is just a spectacular
one of the best
person and senator.
And one of the leaders in the campaign to make sure that there was a Republican majority in the United States Senate.
Yeah, I think
he ran the campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's highly likely that Republicans retain the seat. But I'm sure whoever we nominate and elect will be just great. But Steve's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to fill that spot.
Absolutely. Just the best of the best. On behalf of Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Lavine, and myself, Judge Richard Weinberg, we want to thank you for listening today. We look forward to being with you again next week. As always, God bless you. God bless your families. And in these dangerous, dangerous times, of course, God bless America. Thank you for listening, and be well. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Let the Record Show with Judge Weinberg, Chairman Jesse Garcia, and Eric Lavine. You can hear Let the Record Show Sunday mornings at 6. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our nation has to offer, especially health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.